Welcome to another amazing story unwrapped. The Facebook Live broadcast designed to inspire, to encourage, and to motivate you to overcome life's challenges and triumph over every adversity that you face. Now, we believe that God is writing your amazing life story, but the book is not yet finished. Instead, we believe the best lines, the best chapters of your story are still waiting to be written. We want to give you the encouragement to do that. In about 2 hours from now, the President of the United States will bring his State of the Union address to the nation. Now, I would say that the State of the Union is, well, it's widespread dissatisfaction. It seems that we live in the season of our discontent. There never seems to be enough money, enough security, enough happiness today. No one can apologize enough to satisfy offended people. No one can be politically correct enough to please thin-skinned folks. No one can be pure enough for the purist. No one can give enough affirmation, enough attention to those who are emotionally needy. The anorexic is never thin enough. Foodaholics never get enough to eat. The fearful never get enough control, enough money, enough security. Now maybe tonight you have a gnawing hunger in your life. Perhaps you're dissatisfied with life in general. Maybe you crave something more, or maybe even lots of things more than you already have. But it seems like enough is never quite enough. Do you long for peace and satisfaction? Are you worn out from trying to get more? Well, let me unwrap a story for you. I call it When Enough is Enough. And though his warrior father had carved out a kingdom for the crown prince, it was never big enough for him. The prince had a voracious appetite that could never be satisfied. And that craving for more would send the prince to the ends of the earth in a never-ending quest that still astounds the world some 2,500 years later. Now, the crown prince was only 20 years old when his father was brutally assassinated. After rounding up and ruthlessly executing all of his rivals, the boy conqueror began to march across planet Earth. His army of some 30,000 warriors blitzkrieged from the Balkans all the way to India in less than 13 years. They covered some 10,000 miles on sandaled feet, making the mechanized conquest of our modern high-tech military operations look almost slow by comparison. The statistics of that amazing 13-year odyssey seem almost impossible. This ancient juggernaut conquered so many cities and nations that make up what is now Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Greece, Jordan, Israel, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Arabia, Egypt, the Balkans, and part of India. His empire stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Himalayan mountains, across 3 continents. The conqueror's rule spanned more than 2 million square miles of earth before he was 32 years of age. When he reached the Indus River, his bone-weary army refused to take on the war elephants of India. After the better part of 2 decades, his troops just wanted to go home. The ancient Greek historian Plutarch writes that 32-year-old Alexander the Great sat on the banks of the Indus River and wept like a baby because there were no more worlds to conquer. Most historians figured that Alexander the Great would have marched his bone-weary men all the way to China if they would have followed him. With an unsatisfied hunger that still gnawed at his restless soul, Alexander the Great sadly marched back to Babylon, where he drank himself into a stupor. In June of the year 323 BC, he died at the age of 32. Now, the cause of his death is still mysterious. Most likely it was typhoid fever, but some conspiracy theorists suspect that his generals, who carved up his empire after his death, might have poisoned him. He was carried in an ornate casket back to Alexandria in Egypt, one of the more than 70 cities that this narcissist named after himself. Now that airtight burial box became the final resting place of a man for whom the world was never big enough. Alexander the Great's tutor, Aristotle, often lamented that young Alexander could conquer the world, but he was never able to conquer his own lust, his own passions, his own wild imaginations. And perhaps the biggest nation of all is our wild imagination. Certainly Pascal was right when he said that there is within all of us a God-shaped vacuum as infinite as God himself. We can possess the whole universe and all that it contains and still not fill that vast emptiness within us. So tonight, if you have a soul hunger, you might want to remember this. When too much is never enough, give yourself to the infinite one, who is infinitely more than enough. Dissatisfaction, discontent, it's all around us. It eats most of us up. Like Alexander the Great, we're never satisfied. I want to go back again as we wrap this up to think about the statement by Blaise Pascal, the famous French philosopher and mathematician, who made that oft-quote statement that God has created us with a God-shaped vacuum that is as big as God himself. And here's the problem for all of us. If it's true that God created us for himself, it was St. Augustine who said, God has made us for himself and we will be restless until we find our rest in him. So if Pascal is right, that God created us with a vacuum, a longing as big as he is, it would be infinite. It would be like some black hole in outer space that swallows up whole planetary systems. If it's a God-shaped vacuum and God is infinite, then that hunger, that emptiness within every one of us, as big as God, is bigger than the whole universe. What that means is, by definition, that any created thing that we seek to fill that God-shaped vacuum, whether it's money, power, affirmation, whether it's food, whether it's material wealth, whether it's power, whether it's prosperity, whatever it is we seek, by definition, is just sucked away in that black hole. We get something, for a moment it fills us up, we seem satisfied, and it doesn't take long before that thing we wanted doesn't satisfy, and we want more of that thing. Someone once asked John Rockefeller, when he was the wealthiest man in the world, he said, "Sir, when will you have enough money?" And John Rockefeller said, "Son, I will have enough money when I have $1 more than I do today." John Rockefeller never had enough dollars to satisfy that God-shaped vacuum. Neither did I've known Hollywood actors, Hollywood superstars, in fact, that I've known personally, who are never satisfied, never enough applause, and after their screen career is over, as they age, they are empty. They're some of the most empty people I've ever known. And so the first thing we need to understand is there is that God-shaped vacuum in every one of us. Unless we fill it with God, it can never be filled by anything in creation. So I would suggest to you that if you recognize that you would want to fill it with God. Develop a personal relationship with God. I would say, secondly, be satisfied with what God gives you. St. Paul said, I've learned to be content in any and every situation. I know what it is to have plenty. I know what it is to be in want. And I've learned to be content. And so learn to be content with the little things you have. Enjoy what you have now. I remember what Jesus said. He said, if you're faithful in small things, God will make you Lord over many things. So learn to enjoy the small things. Unless you enjoy the small things, you'll never be able to enjoy the big things. That's really important. It was King Solomon who said, all my life I've striven after everything, and I've found it's just vanity. It's just chasing after the wind. So be satisfied with what you have. Learn to thank God for what you have. Enjoy what you have. Well, is never, in some ways, what we have will never be enough. But if we can find joy in it, it will be more than enough. I hope you'll learn to find joy in the small things, learn to find joy in your family, learn to find joy in your freedom. And if you listen tonight to the President's address, which I plan to do, his State of the Union, I listen to every President's State of the Union. I don't think I've missed one since I've been an adult. As you listen tonight, be thankful you live in America. Be thankful for the good things that you have. It's not perfect. There are things that we'll never have this side of paradise, but be thankful for what you have. Well, I'll see you next Thursday at the day after tomorrow at 12:50 in the afternoon. God bless. Have a great rest of the evening and a great day tomorrow.